Hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. My name is Meredith Gershenson. I am a research analyst here at Workforce, and as the title suggests, we're going to talk a little bit about how to protect your business against organized retail crime. Today, I am joined by David Johnston. David, thank you so much for coming on.
Meredith, thanks for having me.
Awesome. David is the VP of Asset Protection and Retail Operations at the National Retail Federation. David's job involves leading initiative and member programs focused on asset protection and store operations, facilitating engagement across industry and promoting best practices and policy initiatives around crime, violence, loss, and issues challenging the profitability of retail store operations. So we're going to be covering the gamut here. I'm assuming there's a lot to cover, so we're going to get right into it. To give everyone a quick walkthrough of our platform here, we have the chat box to the right. Feel free to throw in any and all questions you might have. We're going to go through a Q&A at the very end with David. So feel free to throw them in the chat box. I will tag them and we will get to them to the end. We will have a couple of poll questions as well. Those will just slide up right on the bottom left of your screen. We love to engage with you all, see where everyone's head's at. So feel free to fill those out. And then we do have an awesome handout for you guys at the end. It's actually coming from the National Retail Federation, their security survey report from this past year. And it really beautifully sums up what we're going to be discussing today, some of the highlights of the data that we'll be covering in some of our slides. And if you're watching live, I am really excited to offer some SHRM and HRPDC IDs. So if you're trying to get recertified and you're a member of SHRM or HRCI, I will share those PDC IDs at the very end of the webinar. So be sure to stick around for its entirety. And finally, to give a little background on workforce.com, we are a workforce management software company who specializes in scheduling and time and attendance. And really, our overarching goal at the end of the day is to help business leaders and frontline managers make the best decisions for their company. Great. Now that we got all that out of the way, David, I would love for you to, tell us a little bit about some of the work you do as VP of Asset Protection and Retail Operations, and just a little bit about what the role itself involves.
Yeah, thanks again, Meredith. First, the National Retail Federation, or the NRF, is the world's largest retail trade association. And the membership consists of retailers across all segments, sizes, and scale, including international brands. So our focus is to provide the advocacy to policy issues, insights, education, research, subject matter expertise, and also to afford the retail membership the opportunity to network and collaborate for the overall good of the industry and collaborate across all the disciplines involved in the retail industry. So my role, as you had mentioned, supports all of that, coming from a specific subject matter expertise of asset protection, loss prevention, and retail operations. So really focusing on the profitability of the retail environment, and more specifically, those things like we're going to talk today: organized retail crime, violence, theft, fraud, that can impact that profitability.
I would love to hear how you found yourself, at the National Retail Federation. What was some of the experience that led you to where you are now?
Yeah, well, I'm over 3 decades of retail experience, primarily in the loss prevention, asset protection world. So for more than 30 years, I've served as a practitioner for several retailers, as well as a solution provider focusing on data analytics technologies and other retail point of sale technologies and so forth. So, throughout my career, I've always been involved with associations, specifically the National Retail Federation. The last 7 years, I've served as a member of their LP Advisory Council. When my recent job prior to coming here in November, I was a global security executive for the second largest restaurant brand in the U.S. So with my experience as a practitioner, my experience as a solution provider, all the work that I've done on the association, when this job became available, I saw it as an opportunity to give back to the entire industry, to be able to take everything that I've learned and been able to build in my career and help other retailers continue to grow and flourish.
You mentioned that you were a part of some of the committees in the past at the NRF. I would love to hear about, some of the work that you have done within your current committee and even in previous ones as well.
Yeah, well, committees and councils play a large role here at the NRF with our membership. And, there are a number of them, too many for me to even state, all at one time. But when it comes to things like data privacy and store operations and supply chain, loss prevention, government relations, sustainability, and labor, those are all the different components that make up the NRF councils and committees that we have here. So, it doesn't have to be just at the C level. It goes down to, various levels in an organization where you can engage and you can work with the NRF and the NRF working on behalf of you and your peers to be able to bring these policy issues and these advocacies, to whatever is impacting your individual retail establishment. Outside of the committees, we also have education and content that works on conferences to support the retail industry, and even our NRF Foundation, which has the Rise Up training and credentialing programs to help retailers, grow their labor workforce and help individuals who want to get into retail management to take courses and build their credentials so that they can help further their own professional development.
I mean, if you guys go on the NRF website, you would know exactly what David's talking about. And the mass amount of committees, there is something for everything. It's amazing the work you guys are doing, and just lending that voice from frontline operators and managers to government officials is pretty amazing. And you mentioned some of the policies and legislation that we have the NRF to thank that have actually made it all the way up to Congress and beyond. So, kudos to you guys really for doing exactly what some of these, hard workers need at the end of the day and being that voice.
Yeah, we're very appreciative of supporting the membership, and, we don't stop. There are things that we're continuing to help push through Congress, the new Congress that started this January. There are a lot of issues with regards to fairer swipe fees and credit cards for retailers, and healthcare and tax and privacy issues that benefit the consumer, but also benefit the retailer's ability to serve the consumer. And then, of course, we have the organized retail crime bill, which I know we'll talk about a little later in the conversation.
Yeah, and I mean that segues me perfectly into my next question. What is ORC and what exactly does it entail?
Yeah, organized retail crime is really shoplifting and retail theft, but being done in an effort to support an organized, enterprised network who is really planning and executing large-scale thefts against retailers for the sole purpose of reselling that merchandise back into the consumer marketplace. And, to really define it, the act that the retailer sees involving organized retail crime would be the acts of shoplifting, smash and grab robberies, burglaries that are focusing on merchandise, and even some of the, the credit card and gift card scams that are out there. But behind these shoplifters or these boosters and these thieves is a criminal network that is really orchestrating and planning it and operating it as an illicit business to get the merchandise back into the marketplace.
And you touched on a really important part of ORC, that being a lot of it is invisible, so to speak. A lot of it is happening behind the scenes in this modern day of age. None of it is in person and physical of somebody coming in and, robbing a store or anything like that. It is a lot of fraud. It's a lot of credit card fraud. It's a lot of gift card fraud. And I think, we'll go into that more later on, but I think that's a really important topic, because I think when a lot of even managers and frontline workers who are thinking of organized retail crime, it's the physicality of it. It's not so much of the, but this is happening while we're sleeping. That's
100% correct. we're starting to see more in the retail environment, and our retailers are telling us that, shoplifting used to be that invisible crime where
Right.
someone would come in, would look around, would conceal an item, not want to be seen, not want to be caught, and go out. That is still happening. But what we're seeing more and more of are these open and brazen acts of theft
Right.
that, individuals are walking in and taking out garbage bags and hockey or duffel bags and just sweeping the shelves in front of customers and in front of retail associates and even in front of store security personnel without a care for what's going to happen to them. And the challenge that we have here, particularly with the retail associates, is that the propensity for violence increases when someone is that open and engaging in those types of crimes.
I mean, like for me personally, I live in Chicago. I've seen this kind of stuff firsthand, and it was rampant a couple of months, maybe a year or two ago when COVID was hitting, and there's a lot of riots going on. So it's insane, what is happening and how much it's been on the rise. And I would love to point to this slide in particular, going off of what you're talking about of that past year aggression and violence, associated with ORC. You're seeing these numbers. A lot of people, almost 50%, are saying somewhat more, if not much more, in terms of how much violence is occurring. And I think it's really interesting to see on this bottom table ORC teams being formed, and and what this looks like, what some of the numbers look like for them when they have a team dedicated to addressing these issues, dedicated to responding to them. So my question for you, David, is to what degree are businesses actually being impacted by ORC, and how about on an industry-wide level, what does this mean?
Yeah, well, businesses are being impacted in a number of different ways. First and foremost, we're starting to see these thefts occur across the nation. So it doesn't matter whether you're in a large metropolitan area or a suburban area or rural area. We're starting to see these groups and these individuals move across the country in conducting their theft. So no community is safe. No retailer is not a target. We've heard small businesses, we've heard national retailers. So businesses are being impacted by not only the financial impact to the lost merchandise, but you're also looking at it from a labor perspective and trying to maintain good labor relations with your employees and making sure that, number one, they're safe. Number two, that they understand how to handle, these thefts when they do occur. And then also the cost of securing goods is increasing across the board.
Interesting.
More security officers, more merchandise is being locked up. So you're implementing more security controls, which again comes back to an impact to the consumer. Because now the consumer and the retailers, they don't want to lock everything up because now the consumer has to go and find an employee in order to get something unlocked in order for it to purchase. But if you don't lock up the merchandise, then the merchandise may be stolen and not available for purchase.
Right.
It's really a catch-22 when you get to that situation. So, the degree of businesses being impacted, it depends on the business, where you're located, what merchandise you offer to sell. But I can tell you that we're starting to see what used to be the prime items that were being stolen by shoplifters are now, the list is starting to become much more broad. We're starting to see inexpensive health and beauty care items that are being stolen. We're starting to see, toilet paper during COVID, of course, Tide detergent. And now, where it used to be some of the high-end apparel or the high-end designer goods, it's now starting to become everyday household items.
I live across from a CVS, and I went there, I think even just a week ago, and the amount of times I had to wave down someone working on the floor to help me get some, Tide to go or anything like that. It was insane. Everything's locked up, everything you need a key for, it's all like behind a glass, sliding door. It's crazy how much that's changed over the past year, because again, it was not like this until recently. It's wild.
No, and retailers don't want to lock up their merchandise.
Right, of course.
They know that it is going to have an impact to the shopping experience.
Mhm.
It is even going to have an impact to a certain degree on sales. But again, there's that fine balance between, is that merchandise available for purchase, or is the merchandise, stolen and no longer available for the consumer?
That's so interesting. We talked a little bit about the safety of the customers and, of course, of the frontline staff, those who are actually working in the stockroom, the register, on the floor. What does this mean for the loyalty, the retention of these people in terms of how safe they're feeling when ORC is actually on the rise?
Yeah, in conversations I've had with retailers, first and foremost, safety is the priority. You can replace merchandise, you can't replace
Sure.
a person. So, they want to focus on the safety for those that are working there. But they also understand that it does take a toll and an impact to the retail associate, where, you're working there because you represent the brand, you enjoy the organization, and you have a sense of feeling to protect the merchandise.
Right.
And so it's challenging, because we've had retail associates who have gone the extra way to try to thwart criminal activity or chase down shoplifters or prevent them from stealing and leaving the stores. And as much as we want to say that's the right thing to do, it's not.
Mhm.
It is much better to let the situation play its course, observe, report, and then, work on recovery
Right.
and work with law enforcement, because, we want to make sure that everybody's safe. So, when you see someone come in and they're openly stealing, think about what needs to be done, and think about the safety of your employees and your customers first.
And, we'll get into this more later. I think it's really important to highlight how some of the work that you guys are doing is changing things from the inside out, opposed to thwarting those who are coming in very obviously stealing, might be armed, whatever it is, and putting those who work at the business at risk, and those who are even shopping there at risk. And what you guys are doing is going straight to Congress and using some of that legislation and those policy making, and working with those in Washington to turn that around. And I think that's a very great point to highlight. We talked obviously about the safety of employees, of customers, but in terms of the ROI, I think that this is something really important to cover, especially for those who are more on the operational side of things, who are looking at the labor costs. This slide really speaks to it. For those who are just listening in on their phones, I'll read out this quote I posted on the top. On average, respondents reported inventory shrink of 1.4%. This is in line with the 5-year average of 1.5%. When taken as percentage of total retail sales, retail shrink represented $94.5 billion in losses in 2021. So, David, my question for you is here is, as ORC is obviously not only impacting the safety of frontline staff safety, but how does it impact customers and ultimately a business's ROI?
Yeah, and I'm going to add some more detail to this slide here, because this was taken when our respondents to the National Retail Security Survey talk about loss and report loss. They report it across certain categories. So we have the category of internal theft, which is employees stealing; external theft, which is the component of shoplifting, organized retail crime, and burglaries. And then there's administrative errors, paperwork errors, waste, damages, and so forth. So all of that combined is what's represented here in the 94.5 billion, which is almost $5 billion more than the previous year. So
Right.
we are continuing to see an increase in the reported losses from our retail respondents. When you talk about the shrink average can also differ depending on how retailers calculate shrink. So, on the average there for last year, it's about $1.40, so 1.4. So $1.40 for every $100 taken in would be lost. Some of the details behind this slide is that of that 94.5 billion, 37% was represented from external theft, which is the shoplifting and the organized retail crime. That was the number one category, with internal theft coming in at about 25%.
Oh, wow.
Some things that are hidden behind here, and it's not apples to apples, is when you look at an inventory shrink percentage from a retailer's perspective, they take their entire store. So it's counting the physical inventory of your entire location and then comparing that against the book inventory of your entire location. If you are a retailer that sells various categories of goods, so we'll take a mass merchant that could have electronics, health and beauty care, apparel. Across an entire store, you may have a very low percentage of shrink. But in certain categories, particularly high theft items, you could have a shrink percentage that could be double digits. So even though we're seeing that this is in line with the 5-year average, what we did notice in our survey is that external theft is continuing to creep up in its percentage and is definitely the highest category, which again correlates with what our retail community is seeing with all of these acts of shoplifting and fraud and organized retail crime.
So going in more of the solutions aspect of it, what are some recommendations that managers should take into consideration when curating a recovery plan?
Yeah, and before I answer that, I do want to get back to the impact to the customers and the business ROI, because as I had mentioned, it's not just the loss of merchandise that's being stolen. It's the loss of customer retention. If the product's not available for them to come and purchase, many customers will then go and seek online marketplaces in order to get the product. We also have to look at it from product protection standpoint. And if you're selling food items or any goods that have expiration dates, there have been instances where individuals will steal items, baby formula, meats, and other foods, and will go and either alter the product or alter the dates in order to extend the shelf life as it moves through the illicit business channels back into the marketplace. So we want to make certain that the products remain safe in the consumer marketplace. So that can impact your consumers. It can impact your business. If you're known as a business that's not selling goods that are protected and safe. And then also it comes into the cost of securing the location. The monies that's being put into adding security personnel, adding additional cameras, that impacts the ROI as well. So as we talk about recommendations that managers and business owners can take, we want to look at it from the aspects of prevention, response, and recovery. So when it comes to the prevention of shoplifting, good customer service still helps. Majority of the shoplifters, even those that are involved in organized retail crime, they still don't want to be caught doing what they're doing.
Sure.
So making sure that you have good customer service, you're acknowledging the customer, you're asking for help is still one of the best things to do in the preventative measures. You also want to look at your location and see if you can limit areas that may be more prone to theft, blind spots, corners. Is there expensive merchandise that you might be able to bring closer to the point of sale or areas where more people will gather, keeping it away from the doors? Of course, if you have security equipment, you want to make sure it's in good working order. tested on a regular basis, particularly cameras and video recordings, so that that information can be used in the recovery process when dealing with law enforcement. And then know your inventory levels. Understand, what you have on your location, where it's located, because then if you start to see a large open area of goods, you have an idea of what was actually taken. Mm-hmm. From the response perspective, again, safety first. Make sure that your employees know that you don't expect them to go and chase down a shoplifter. We want to make sure that their safety and the customer safety is first and foremost. Have procedures in place that can help you observe and report and record incidents of known loss, shoplifters, what they look like, where they went, what did they take? And again, of course, don't chase them. Mm-hmm. From a recovery standpoint, contact the police or mall security or shopping center security. Let them know that these incidents are occurring. One of the things that we've heard the most is that the data is not supporting what retailers are saying is happening out there. And it's because a lot of retailers are not reporting these acts of shoplifting because they may think or know that law enforcement won't respond or that nothing will happen. We want to make sure that law enforcement understands what's happening. Even if they don't do anything, at least notify them that it's happening. Mm-hmm. Provide good descriptions. Another area of concern where we've talked to law enforcement is law enforcement responds based on different levels of crimes. If you report that a shoplifting took place, they may respond understanding that that shoplifter is gone and that there's nothing that they can do. But if any threats or aggressive violence or violence itself occurred during the commission of a shoplifting event, when you notify police, tell them that first, because they'll respond quicker to violent acts and violent crimes than they will property crimes. So we've heard from law enforcement that they'll get phone calls saying that a shoplifting event has occurred, and when they show up, that's when they realize that the person may have pulled out a weapon or the person may have committed a violent act against the employee, where now they're trying to find somebody where they could have responded faster if they had known what they were coming into. And then last, talk to your employees. Express to them your appreciation of what they're going through. Make sure that you talk to them on a daily basis to get a sense of how they're feeling and what's going on in their lives, to make sure that the trauma of any repetitive thefts or what's going on here tries not to impact them and in turn your labor resources.
Those are all amazing suggestions and recommendations. I think it's interesting talking about of course, the correlation with law enforcement and, working with the police. And it's interesting that you touched on there's some misreporting or lack thereof when it comes to people talking and wanting to actually report it to the police and being in the mindset of, are they actually going to help versus, oh, they're going to help, and I think reporting it in that sense of saying, no, this is a violent act. We need you guys here right now. We need this recorded and justified is so crucial. I think that's such a good point. I would love to go more into the legislation side of things. I would love for you to tell me a little bit about the 2 bipartisan bills that you and your task force has actually been working on with Senators Chuck Grassley and Catherine Cortez Masto.
Yeah, well, we've been working for the last couple of years with the U.S. Congress on, enacting bills and legislation at a national level to help with these organized retail crime networks. The first one that passed actually in 2022 was the Inform Act. And the Inform Act requires online marketplaces to verify and validate their sellers with specific information. So name, telephone number, email address, business address. For anyone that sells merchandise on any online marketplace, that exceeds a certain dollar amount or exceeds a number of sales in a particular continuous time frame. What that is going to do is that's going to help us remove the online marketplace as an illicit channel to sell stolen and counterfeit goods. So we're pleased that the Inform Act passed in December of 2022 and will go into effect this June.
Wow.
The current legislation in both the Senate and the House is the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act. And what that will do is that will establish a national organized retail crime coordination center under the Department of Homeland Security, where their focus will be to create task forces across their different field offices that include local, state, tribal, law enforcement, as well as involving retailers to support the information sharing, the investigative resources, and the coordination to go after these national and international ORC networks. It will also help to allow the federal prosecutors and law enforcement to order criminal forfeiture on any monies and properties that they come across post-conviction, so that it kind of takes away their ability to hide the money and maintain the property once they're convicted of these crimes. So our focus and our push is to get this moving forward, because what's happening right now with these networks understand that local and state laws differ, from felony thresholds to, what the crimes are with regards to shoplifting and organized retail crime. So they're traveling state to state or county to county, understanding what some of the laws are to try to make sure that they commit these crimes underneath specific thresholds of the law. So having this national coordination allows us to work collaboratively as a industry and as a law enforcement community at the local, state, and national level to go after these large networks who are really the ones that are pushing these shoplifters out to the locations. They're the ones that are going and getting them to steal from your stores. These are the fencing operations, the warehouse operations, the distributors. So we're hopeful that, these two bills that are now sitting in their respective judicial committees will have more sponsorship from other senators and representatives, and we can get it pushed through this year.
So what is it that owners and operators might see if these bills are hopefully passed?
Yeah, we're going to start to see better communication and coordination across the nation. As I mentioned, right now, there are a lot of states that are building task forces to combat organized retail crime, or trying to pass legislation at the state level to make organized retail crime a more severe crime than shoplifting. If these two bills pass, then what we'll see is a coordinated effort, very similar to what we see when dealing with drugs or even, anti-terrorism, with these task force that are made up of all state, local, and national law enforcement. So the retailers are going to see a more coordinated effort with law enforcement. Hopefully it's more resources to help with the investigations. And then it's a first step towards pushing out more legislation at the state and local level to help get these people off the streets.
It sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, it sounds like, in a sense, these bills are helping to catch up law enforcement to speak the same language as retailers in a way.
Exactly. Meredith, that's a very good call out, where, we want to make sure that we're all working in unison and we understand the same problem and we're working toward the same goal, instead of working independently by individual retailer as well as individual law enforcement agency.
That's awesome. How can retailers help support these bills?
Well, first and foremost, you can reach out to your U.S. Senator or House of Representative and tell them that you'd like to support the Grassley and Cortez Mastro bill. It's S40 and HR 285 are the two bill numbers in the Senate and the House. You can also go to the NRF website, and under our ORC page, we have a grassroots campaign that makes it easy for you to just click on a button, put in your residence, and it'll tell you who your senator and representative is, and you can send them a letter asking them to support it. And then on top of that, go to your state and your local community leaders and talk to them about what they're doing about organized retail crime and retail theft.
Mm-hmm.
You know, many states are starting to enact laws. Many states have started task forces, but far too many have not. And we're starting to see the crime rates and the theft rates continue to increase in many communities.
I love it. And I love that second option. You guys make it super easy for everybody to just have that letter already filled out. That's genius. I would love for you to tell me a little bit about the NRF Protect event that you guys have coming up in June with your committee, and maybe even give a small preview, a small synopsis of, what that might look like.
Yeah, every year we hold a conference called NRF Protect, where asset protection, loss prevention, cybersecurity, and digital fraud professionals and retailers, so we have retailers across all disciplines, attend to talk about issues like organized retail crime and violence and theft and shrink. So, this June, between the 5th and the 7th, it's going to be held at the Gaylord Texan Resort in Grapevine, Texas, just north of Dallas. We've got some great speakers. The deputy director of CISA will be there. We have some industry experts from Teneo Risk Advisory and CNN. We also have several retail organizations that'll be talking about, how to tackle organized retail crime without an organized retail crime team. So how do you use your existing team in order to help with your ORC efforts? We also have another retailer talking about looking at inventory levels and creating risk indexing to know exactly where you have to focus your attention on. And then we also have a representative from Gavin DeBecker Associates who will be talking about, focusing on retail and workplace violence, but doing so from a far left perspective of daily check-ins with your employees to make sure that they're not showing any signs of potential grievance or ideation or possibilities of workplace violence down the road. So we really focus on a lot of the challenges that are happening today, but also looking at what are some of the issues of tomorrow. And that's where we're going to focus a lot of our attention on, gift card scams, phone scams, credit card, and cybersecurity.
That perfectly segues me to this last slide we have on how to act now. I think a lot of what's covered in these 5 points is talking about looking into tomorrow's technology, as you said, looking into some of the security efforts that you can implement. And I would love for you to talk about, what are some actionable solutions for the here and now? And are there any resources or any resource center that they can maybe turn to?
Yeah, as far as some tips and actions or takeaways, I think that what you have to look at is your individual business and make sure that you definitely have policies and procedures and conversations in place with your employees on how to act in the event of a shoplifting, or as this this slide mentions in slide 1, what are your policies about returns and POS and e-commerce? I always come with the philosophy of good store operations equals better loss prevention. If you run a good business, then you're going to better understand what's happening in your store when it comes to losses. The other thing is integrate loss prevention into your daily business routine. Don't try to make it something separate that you have to remember. So again, looking at, step 1 here, when you look at your returns, think about your business and how could someone commit return fraud against you, and try to establish policies and procedures that limit those capabilities. On the e-commerce side, how are you accepting credit cards? And, what happens if a credit card can't be swiped? What are your manual procedures? Because fraudsters will always try to divert what the normal procedure is to get you to do something secondary, which is something that they could, commit fraud against. And then make sure that you do understand what are the items in your locations that, as you say, are craved, which is our acronym for those highly, liked items when it comes to stealing. And then create the recovery plan and make sure you communicate with your people about what to do in the event of, a shoplifting incident. And then finally, do look at loss prevention technologies and training and education initiatives that are out there. And with regards to resources, look at the NRF website, because we have a lot of resources, but also look at your state retail associations and your local chamber of commerce sites. They can be very helpful and have some resources. When it comes to Department of Homeland Security, Google Operation Boiling Point with Department of Homeland Security. They have a great page out there now to focus on public awareness to organized retail theft and organized retail crime. And first and foremost, reach out to your local law enforcement. Build a relationship with them, a proactive relationship with them before things really happen, and be able to talk to them about what they can do to help you prevent theft as well as respond accordingly when theft does take place.
That's such a great tip. And I wanted to quickly highlight number 4 and looking into best OSC or SOC, best practices to audit high impact risks. And what that is security operations center tools. If you Google that, there's a lot of softwares, SOC softwares that offer free resources that we have found. You can even self-audit, what SOC practices you have currently. If you don't have any, it's a great place to start. So I would highly recommend that. And again, talking to your law enforcement, making sure you're communicating to your frontline staff is so important. I would love to end on a great question on summing this all up. What are 1 or 2 top tips, actions, or takeaways the audience should know when it comes to protecting their business against ORC?
First and foremost, safety first. Protect the safety of your employees and your customers. Second is build that relationship with local law enforcement and make sure that you know exactly what needs to be done in the event of a crime, how they would prefer you to notify them, what to expect in response. And then lastly, engage with your retailers in your area and your chamber of commerce and your state retail association. Build a community effort to help prevent theft and to be able to talk to your community leaders about what you're seeing.
That's great. That's awesome. I would love to go into our Q&A. We do have a couple of questions that were actually emailed in. We have our first question from Maria C. She asked, because of the staffing shortage and other factors, we don't have a team dedicated to asset protection /ORC. Primarily, it's down to our operations or general managers. Any recommendations here?
Yeah, without knowing the size of the business or the retail, how many locations, again, as I'd mentioned, good operations equals better loss prevention. Just because you don't have a designated person to support asset protection, find resources that can help you understand the concepts of loss prevention and take those concepts and build them into your everyday business operations. And then, see where each level and each role within your organization can help to support loss prevention. So if it falls on your operations managers, make sure that they understand, how to best set up the business to prevent theft, how to train your employees on recognizing the signs of shoplifting or responding to shoplifting, and then structure what you need to do in order to properly report and engage with law enforcement when it comes to acts of shoplifting and organized theft. You saw in our poll, and you'll see in the handout, that only about 1/3 of the retailers who responded to our survey have dedicated ORC teams.
Mm-hmm.
So most are working, predominantly with either asset protection personnel or with their retail store operations teams.
I actually have a follow-up question for you. Are you seeing more companies building those ORC teams internally, or are you seeing people outsource them, or are you seeing that mass training that you're talking about, and more everybody can be an ORC team member, so to speak?
Well, I think that the larger retailers are probably more likely to build, or at least have dedicated resources
Mm-hmm.
to, look into ORC investigations. A lot of the smaller or specialty retailers are utilizing existing asset protection personnel. And then, as you had mentioned, there are companies out there that do provide third-party services to help with loss prevention, asset protection, or even ORC investigations. And then there are some that are just, utilizing operations teams. And, some retailers look at it as, again, whether it's ORC or not, it's still shoplifting.
Mm.
So the shoplifting is taking place at the store, and that's impacting the store ROI and the shrink. So a lot of them just look at it as a component of a full loss prevention program, not specifically ORC or not, because
Right.
You don't know if you can assume that it's organized if someone's coming in and sweeping the shelf, or something's coming in frequently and stealing, high priced, large scale items. But many are just looking at it's shoplifting, and how do I prevent the shoplifting?
Right. The very bottom line.
The very bottom
at the end
line.
of the day. We have a question emailed in from Philip. He asked, as a managing director of a general merchandise store, a lot of this crime is often invisible. Gift card and coupon fraud is a huge soft spot for our staff and often goes unnoticed or uncommunicated until we're reviewing quarterly reports. What protocols do you recommend here for both upper management and faculty?
Wow. Well, if gift cards and coupon fraud, we could probably do an entire session on
a part two, for sure.
Because that is definitely a completely different pathway.
Right.
What I would recommend that quarterly is probably too long.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely want to make sure that you're looking at things at least monthly when it comes to, anything regarding, financials. Having a quarterly report, you could lose a substantial amount of dollars before knowing that it's even taking place. And then I would also, recommend looking at it from the perspective of your business. So, what does a good customer look like from a standpoint of your report? So from a coupons and from a gift cards perspective, how many purchases, how many times do they use it on a regular basis? Prior to coming here at the NRF, as I said, my organization, we had a very vibrant gift card and mobile app environment. And we would always look at it and see, what does a normal customer do? And then what are we seeing from the outliers?
Sure.
And then once you find the outliers, a lot of it is tightening down the procedures and the policies to make sure that you bring those outliers down. So you have to look at it from what's your business, what falls outside your business, and then what are the mitigation steps you can take to try to shorten.
So a follow-up to that, I guess my question would be, if you're tracking the trends, I guess, of these coupons or gift cards, how do you tie up those loose ends when you're noticing, something's not right here? We're seeing a lot of fraudulent behavior when it comes to these coupon sets or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and that's where we get into a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
Right? So when you,
right.
When you're talking coupons, are they paper coupons? Are they digital coupons? Are they serialized so that they can't be used multiple times? A common coupon fraud, digital coupon fraud would be taking a picture of a coupon and then using that coupon over and over and over again. So you have to look and say, okay, how does your program work? And then again, looking at it from the viewpoint of a thief, how might they be able to take advantage of, your program? And then a lot of it, Meredith, comes down to altering your program and maybe building out some better technologies to help prevent the frauds from taking place. And one last piece of advice I would say is have a conversation with your employees, because employees will know what's happening. They'll know that, this individual is coming in on a regular basis with the same coupon and they're showing me the phone, or, it's a paper coupon and the print is a little, off.
Right.
So they'll know whether or not, what are some of the indicators, and that can help you to strengthen your program.
That's interesting. I think it's also good to point out, I was just listening to this podcast, and there was discussion on internal fraud within a coupon realm of things. And a lot of internal employees were using their discount code that they were allocated and using it for their friends. And I think that's so interesting, because you don't even think about that. Again, it's something that isn't caught until later on and not really looked twice at, because it's internal and because there's a certain level of trust, of course, that you would have with your employees. So yeah, we can go on a whole tangent on this, I'm sure, and we'll have to do a part 2 for sure in the future.